and welcome back to the third episode of Let's Talk Music. It's been quite a while since the last episode, and I hope it is useful to all of you who tuned in. The world has changed drastically in the last 6 months, and we are looking at some tough times ahead. But we hope for the best and keep going. This time around, and especially as an enabler in the music industry, I thought it would be interesting and important to invite industry experts to chat with me on their experiences and thoughts about the music business in India. So let's dive right in and meet our very first guest on Let's Talk Music. She has done some path-breaking work in the entertainment law industry. She's the go-to lawyer for almost all the entertainment industry big shots. She represents legendary artists like A.R. Rahman, Javed Akhtar, Lata Mangeshkar, Sonu Nigam, and so many more. She's one of the leading women in the music business representing India globally as well. And she made history with the unique cases she handled, as well as her merger with the prestigious Anand and Anand law firm as a named partner, and now runs the firm's Mumbai practice as Anand and Anand and Khimani. I have been following her work very closely ever since, and I'm really excited, very thankful also to have her here with me today on today's episode. So please welcome Priyanka Khimani. Thank you so much for taking time out to chat with me today, Priyanka.
Thank you, and thank you for that lovely, glowing introduction. I wasn't prepared for that, so thank you.
It's okay. It's always good to hear it from someone else, no?
Very kind. Thank you so much.
So, tell me, Priyanka, how are you today? How's it going?
Good, surviving this lockdown. I think every day that goes by, we're like, chalo, let's keep up, keep being positive, and hope that we can put this behind soon. So yeah, just like hunkering down and hanging in there. That's it, really.
That's great. I mean, things keep getting interesting over time, right? And your journey has been extremely interesting. I mean, with all the history that you have in the entertainment industry. So that's something that I want the listeners to hear about your journey into this industry and the law practice, and what was your big break?
Sure, we've talked about this in the past,
Yeah.
and like I've always said, completely by fluke, but not even, right. Like I think I believe that everything, as cliche as it sounds, but everything that happens for a reason or leads you to something.
Right.
The people we meet, the places we go to, every single thing you'll see, and I do this even funnily, where every time that something new happens or I meet a new person, I sit and trace back what was the chain, right? Like literally how you figure out the degrees of separation.
Yeah.
And I think with me, the law practice and everything that has happened is literally just that. I think as some of your listeners may already know, I used to write back in junior college and all through college and even law school, right? And I think a lot of that unknowingly, subconsciously did sort of sow the seeds for where I am today, led to some relationships that eventually translated into work. And like I'm saying, everything, life comes to a full circle and everything happens for a reason because it's leading you to something. Of course, at that time, when you're just going through all that failure, rejection, you don't want to believe it. So it's only now looking back where I'm like, okay, all that madness and all that heartbreak made some sense.
I know, it is completely worth it also at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so funny, come to think of it, when I was writing, nobody, at that time, you didn't think about copyright contracts, and, little did you imagine that it will become your entire life someday.
Life. I know. It's just, anyway. So I think your story is like something which I really, really, I was very inspired by it. And I think if whoever's interested should go check out Priyanka's story. It's on Your Story, right? Yourstory.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I also wanted to understand, like, how long have you been practicing as an entertainment lawyer? Like how many years has it been?
So it will be 8 years in June.
And what is your first step into it? Like, what is the first project that kind of got you into
So
the
com- like I said, I started working with a very traditional solicitor law firm. Used to do commercial litigation. Was doing my articles with this solicitor's firm.
Right.
I worked with a partner who did a lot of shipping law. So by default, I ended up doing a fair amount of maritime or admiralty matters and dealing
Mm.
with ship arrests and charter party agreements and everything far, far removed from IP and entertainment,
Mm.
and then all sorts of commercial litigation, right? And I think to a great extent, I actually would, owe a lot of credit to that time and to that experience, because a lot of young lawyers also, practitioners, tend to think that, oh, I just need to do IP, I just need to do entertainment. But that's never the
Yeah.
mark of a good lawyer. The mark of a good lawyer is when you have your foundation right. The only way to get that foundation right is to expose yourself to as much varied experience as you can.
Correct.
Because and you'll agree with me, right? When we're
Yeah.
negotiating a deal, it's hardly ever dealing with just the Copyright Act. You're looking at
Yeah.
contracts, you're looking at, Companies Act, you're looking at so many multiple other things. It's a combination of a bunch of statutes, regulations. So I say this to all the young lawyers also, or any young professional who wants to venture into this, that you can't pigeonhole yourself into
Mm.
saying, oh, I will just look at this in isolation.
Mm.
It doesn't work like that. So I think likewise for me, given that I was working with this firm doing litigation experience, I think 6 months into it, you just receive a chance call with from someone who had worked with, written extensively for, had assisted for a while,
Mm.
and happened to call me saying, listen, someone needs some advice, and why don't you just talk to this person and tell them what it is. And the
Mm.
next thing I know, that the person who was looking for advice turned out to be none other than Lata Mangeshkar.
My
And
God. Yeah.
you have this 6 month old junior associate in the firm going and telling the managing partner of that firm that, listen, I think I have a client, and oh, it's, by the way, it's Lata Mangeshkar. So I think from that point on, really, there was no looking back. And again, I think I'm very grateful for that time, because all of that experience, I mean, as 6 months old, it's not that you're a phenomenal lawyer, because clearly you don't have the sort of experience that it takes. But I think what a lot of people uh, forget when they're sort of even tracing my journey is that before that, there's an entire 8 years of having worked in
Mm.
the entertainment business, right? And that teaches you things that
Of
no
course.
business school, no law school is ever going to be able to teach you. And a lot of entertainment really is about commercial knowledge. It
Yeah.
is, of course, knowing the law, but it's an industry. And like
Industry.
any industry, you need to know what are the do's and don'ts, what are traditional practices, what is customary, what isn't. And I
Mm.
think that was that one slight edge that I had, which helped me take up a lot of matters very early on in my career, and yeah, has led us to where we are today.
That's great. That's amazing. So, I mean, you mentioned industry practice, right? That's something which you've been familiar with. You've seen how the industry works, and
Yes.
as a lawyer and implementing the law and representing clients, and I think most of your clients are artists. So, what has been your biggest problem in terms of dealing with an industry practice that's probably against something that's in the law?
So, I'll answer this slightly differently, right? I don't think there's a black and white answer to this.
Mm.
There are lots, and so also I wouldn't say that there's any industry practice that is good or bad. And I
Mm.
know a lot of your listeners might be a little surprised hearing this from someone who's extensively represented talent.
Yeah.
I always say this, that all commercial dealings are a matter of willingness, right? It's
Yeah.
willing seller, willing buyer.
Exactly.
Um, so a lot of times when artists feel shortchanged, saying that, oh, but this is not a fair deal, equally, I find in all of those conversations that a we don't explore enough, we don't try enough, we don't push hard enough.
Yeah.
I'll give you simple examples, right? Even when someone thinks that, oh, this particular someone has taken my song, and I don't know what to do about it, and I'll ask them something as simple. Forget this extreme step of going to a lawyer and incurring legal costs. I'll ask
Mm.
them one simple thing: have you called them out on it? Did you send at the very least a text message, an email? Nahi. You
Mm.
are going on a rant on social media. You want to, that is also later. And more often than not, people don't say anything about it. You're just talking to your friends and feeling bad about yourself, right?
Yeah.
So coming back again to industry practices, um, look, like I'm saying, it's all commercial dealings. You have to be pragmatic about what you want.
Mm.
And I think depending on where you are, different stages of your career, you have different bargaining power, different leverage. Also, your wants are different, right? Today, when I'm a young artist starting out, what is my want? I want that break.
Mm.
And what am I willing to do in return for that break? I may be willing to give up a lot of things,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So again, you gave up something to get something. Then you climb one step up in that ladder. Now
Yeah.
at this stage, your want may be that, look, I want to get paid for it. I don't want to certainly do this at a ridiculous price.
Mm.
So again, you give up something in return for getting the price that you think you command. Then you move a little higher and say, okay, now I want to keep, right? So I'm saying there's a gradual progression, right? And all said and done, the industry does bow down to all of this today. That's how you see a variety of deals. Otherwise, you would just have a one size fits all. But it's never the case, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
there is clearly a reason that today there is such a variation in terms of deals also, that we see if industry practice was bad and was here, take it or leave it, then we would all be looking at the same kind of deals.
Yeah.
But that's one. Having said that, I'm not at the same time glorifying this industry or our practices. Yes, there are still a lot of flaws. And I think if I had to call out a few of them, and
Mm.
again, this is by no means to sort of isolate one particular segment of the industry, but I think it's a problem that everyone faces as a whole.
Mm.
One is this, such a disagreement on interpretation of what the statute is, especially the
Yeah.
amendments of the
Yeah.
2012 Act, right? And I'm like,
Absolutely.
guys, it's 8 years later. Get your act together, like literally and figuratively.
I know.
So that is a big pain point, even till date. Say, for example, performers' rights, right? You have a
Mm.
clear provision in the agreement which
Yeah.
says that yes, now even performers are entitled to royalty, and yet routinely, in fact,
Yeah.
as recently as yesterday, in a negotiation, I will be asked to waive that right.
I know.
And
Oh my
again,
God.
I turn to the performer and say, because I'm bound by instructions, that listen, what do you want to do? Unfortunately, fortunately, even sometimes even the performer doesn't understand or doesn't care. Says, listen, I'm getting what I'm getting today. Forget it. I don't want to worry about this intangible, and stall the deal. So things
Mm.
like that. And also this whole practice of no, this is our position, and therefore you must concede.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is what I find very amusing. I often in very sweetly in my negotiations tell people, "Ki company policy hai na, it's not the law of the land. Who makes the company policy? You make, right? So it is
Yeah.
company policy is subject to change also, so change it." Uh, but so I think these are things that I find very amusing. But I guess like everything else, it comes with its own positives and negatives.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of, like contracts which record labels, like, large players in the industry have,
Hmm.
where, especially with, maybe the younger artists, like the ones who are like upcoming and who probably this is like a big break. Like,
Right.
at least I've seen some contracts where they've had, they want them to waive their model rights, they want them to waive any further
Correct.
royalties accruing. But see, like, those are things you're saying you can push back on, right? It's not that,
Yes, yes. I
but
don't think a lot of these deals are not, I think another one big problem, and I think you and I both will agree as professionals,
mm,
is that a lot of time talent, the one big tip to give them is please seek professional advice.
yeah.
More than 9 out of 10 times, they're trying to do it themselves.
Absolutely.
It's like you and I trying to make music. You still can, I certainly
No, my husband can, I can't.
no,
But
no, you
yeah.
also can. Let your listeners also be privy to that. But I certainly can't do that, and it's the same thing, right? With my clients, I mean, there's a reason that they do what they do, and we do what we do. So,
Yeah.
um, yes, very often they're trying to. It's not a DIY thing, and
Mm,
they need to get advice. But coming back to contracts, like they're not. It's not like it's written stone, right? There is flexibility and there is a negotiation. Yes, the negotiation differs depending on who you are, where you are, what's on the table.
mm.
I have seen in these last 8 years such a variety, even in terms of forget the artist negotiation power, my own negotiation power. Right today,
Uh,
so many years later, yes, things change, things work differently because there is a certain amount of credibility that even
yeah.
you're able to garner. So I can only imagine how it must work for talent as well.
Yeah.
Um, so No, I would say that there is enough scope,
Mm.
but it has to be done the right way. There has to be willingness to do it. And honestly, we're living, fortunately, in a day and age where there is so much flexibility because truly everyone wants content.
Yeah.
And if you're no longer reliant on that old model of, film music and producer and studio and, actor has to like it or whatever, you have
Yeah.
enough and more tools today to put out your own music, to monetize it yourself. There is so much information out there. There are so many services at your disposal where
Yeah.
you perhaps don't need any support. It's just about then content is king. And I think we're truly living in that era.
Mm. Yeah, that's true.
Saying the one thing about contracts also, and I'm saying this again for a lot of younger artists or listeners that are still, sort of starting out, is
Yeah.
that it's not worth splitting hairs, guys.
Mm.
It's really not. Like, I know people have two polarizing attitudes towards contracts. One is that I don't care to sign it; it's a piece of paper,
Yeah.
and the other is that, oh my God, I'm not understanding this, and you're reading every line and trying to completely sort of it makes sense of every word, and find that it's so overwhelming. I would
Mm.
say that please bear in mind that this, like all industries, this is also a place that heavily depends on ultimately a commercial relationship. I am not saying that contracts are unimportant or don't hold their sanctity. Of course, there's a reason that we ultimately have it in writing.
Mm.
Uh, but at the same time, saying don't get so lost in it that you fail to see the opportunity. Equally, there have been instances where contracts, say for example, have not had a right of termination, right, for
Mm.
convenience. And the
Yeah.
artist saying, listen, but how, I don't have a right to terminate, I can't walk out of this. But it's not that, right? You could still walk out for a fundamental breach of your agreement, and this is something that you will not know unless you got proper advice.
Yeah.
So I'm saying there is a solution and there is a fix for everything. You just need to, so don't get overwhelmed saying that, oh my God, I've signed a shitty contract. In fact, it's even relatively easier to set aside shittier contracts
Yeah.
because they are so shitty.
Yeah. Exactly. So anyway, um, I mean, talking about contracts, especially the ones that music directors have with labels, and
Mm-hmm.
going by the kind of rights that the music directors pass on to the labels. And I just want to link that with the remixes and the remakes that are coming out these days.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work? I mean, what has been your experience with it? Like, how is it? And I'm not going to take names, but we know how a certain legend was very unhappy with a recent remake of his song for all the valid reasons.
Yes,
But
rightly so.
yeah, so I just want to know, like, what do they like? Does the music composer or the lyricist have the right to object to these remakes if there's been no express permission granted, or other instances as well?
Okay, so let's look at it in the context of what is happening today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the remixes or recreations or covers that we're seeing of older film songs.
Yeah.
Now, in most instances, it's, I think, safe to make an assumption that the composer of the original works
Mm.
parted with the entirety of the copyright in favor of the producer of that film, who in turn must have given it to the record label, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing's for sure that from a copyright ownership point of view, I
Mm.
don't have any rights to begin with. So, if you're saying, if the question, at times a lot of composers wonder that, oh, but you didn't take my permission to do it, or I didn't give you a right to do this.
Mm.
um, Unfortunately, if you've parted with that right, then I don't need to come to you to take that right. It's as
Mm.
simple as this.
Mm.
If I sold you a house, right, you
Mm.
paid me a certain amount of money that at that point I was happy and I accepted it. You
Mm.
take that house, you decide to flip it. Now the way you renovate it, I feel, makes the house look completely ugly.
Mm.
Do you need my permission before you decided to flip it? No.
Mm.
Unless, yes, of course, my agreement expressly said that, look, Sandhya, if you decide to revamp this house after 5 years, you
Mm.
need to come to me, show me how you plan to revamp it. If I approve, then will you do it?
Mm.
Now, let's acknowledge that that obviously doesn't happen in real estate transactions, and likewise does not, I mean, happens to a certain extent in IP. But
Mm.
it's more or less the same analogy, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
I've parted with my rights. I have given it to you. So unless there was an express caveat saying that if you do decide to do a version, a cover version, a remix, a rendition, or any sort of derivative, or you want to tomorrow adapt this, translate this, you come to me. If there isn't that provision,
Mm.
the label does not require your permission or your sanction to be able to commission that. That's
Okay.
one.
Okay.
Number two is now the whole moral rights argument, which I
Yeah.
feel still to a great extent survives, right? And that is
Yeah.
devoid of your ownership of copyright. So
Mm.
I may have parted with my rights, but if I feel that, look, what you have done is so distortive or so mutilative of what
Mm.
my original works were,
Mm.
then sure, I do have a right to take offense, to take steps, to take remedial measures.
Right.
What are these remedial measures? What is distortion, mutilation? Is ultimately something that courts in this country can decide. Can you do something about it? Yes, 100%. You don't need anyone, you don't need a record label to tell you that.
Yeah.
Today, if a certain composer is upset with a certain version,
Mm.
this composer is entitled to move court and say, listen, I think that this is it's a horrible distortion of my moral rights, and let the courts decide after assessing the original works and the resulting works, that do they feel it is, it isn't,
Mm.
should they award damages, should they, pass any sort of other relief. But uh, that's really the legal position. We
Mm.
can, unfortunately, I think what happens is everyone will talk about it. I'm yet to see a single one of these people file
Mm.
any sort of formal proceedings. So I think till we don't do that,
Mm.
you have to just then be happy with social media shaming and
Right.
press shaming, and that's that, and consider that to be your vindication. So
Yeah.
that's at least my these are my two bits on it.
But
In
I
fact,
was,
I'll give you a tip also, since your
yeah.
listeners are tuning in and listening to this. I think because we've learned our lesson now from the last few situations that have happened,
Yeah.
you could actually find a way to address this contractually.
Mm.
And so, for example, in a lot of contracts, if you do anticipate a situation where, let's say, this is a song that you think is special or whatever, all your works
Mm.
could be special, right?
Mm.
You could try and build in a provision where you say that, listen, if
Yeah.
in future you decide to create any versions of this song, whatever it is, whether it's simply another performance of this song, remix, mashup, an adaptation, what
Mm.
have you, come back to me, offer me a right of first refusal. If I say no, then maybe we talk to you, you go ahead and do something. I'm saying just commercially arriving at a solution like
Solution.
this, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that I was just wondering about is that, like, like you said, you and I, we might be musically inclined, but that's not really our subject matter expertise, right? So when you have courts
Right.
decide whether the current one is like actually infringing the moral rights, I mean, I'm just wondering about how astute their knowledge in music is. But then that's just a rhetoric question. And this is,
Yeah, and that's a one big thing that I feel separately about, that I feel not just for copyright but in general for IP. I think we do
yeah,
need technical courts and technical
I
judges
know.
because it's a nuanced subject. But
I know.
having said that, I feel at least some of our judges and some of the, especially in my experience, has been largely Bombay, Delhi.
Mm.
You do see judges who are very quick on the uptake, who are very savvy, who
Mm.
get a grasp of the subject. So I think, yeah, it's a whole separate issue to debate and mull over if we need specialized IP courts in the country. But I hear you and I understand your concern.
Got it. Okay, and um, just kind of linked to this question. And now, for example, if a composer is going to be credited as the original composer of a remake, and if
Mhm.
you have this song streaming on all online platforms, do they earn any revenue from it?
So this is one thing that I want to clarify for the record, that they are technically earning revenue from all of it. Okay,
Okay.
it's a lot of times people feel that, oh, I'm not getting. One of the most common statements I hear is that, oh, record labels don't give us royalty, or the producer doesn't give us royalty. It
Mm.
is not supposed to come from them.
From
There's
them.
a mechanism with how it has to reach you, and your copyright societies play a large part of this chain of how you can get your royalties, right? So every time a streaming service is streaming your works,
Mm.
a streaming service is seeking licenses on both sides. They are
Mm.
seeking a license on the sound recording side from the record label.
Yeah.
So also they are seeking a license on the underlying side. Now, on the
Mm.
underlying side, the rights that are being utilized largely are reproduction and public performance,
Correct.
which rights they seek directly from a PRO in most instances, unless, of course, you've not assigned those rights to a PRO or the publisher is not a member of the PRO. But in all situations, they will seek a license. So, payment, as far as composers are concerned, authors are concerned, what they need to know is that license fee is being paid for the utilization of your composition on a streaming service. Now, whether that composition is your original composition or it's in the form of a remix or a cover or whatever, every single time your composition has been exploited, expressed, communicated, a license fee is being paid. That's part one.
Okay.
Part two is you collecting it. Now, like I'm saying, if I'm a streaming service and you're the owner of those rights, underlying rights, is a member of, has given those rights to a society, I have gone and paid the society. So the society has collected that money. The society will then pay back the publisher and will pay back the author. So if the author is not a member of the society, you're unfortunately leaving that income on the table.
Right.
So that, I hope, explains why it's also necessary to circle back to the membership of PROs. And again, by no means is this an endorsement of any particular PRO, just for the record. I know we have a history of, our confidence, why our confidence in PROs is as shaken as it is. And I've been at the forefront of a lot of that litigation myself. But having said that, again, just look at PROs in a wider global context. Okay, if you don't like your home PRO, there are multiple other PROs in different parts of the world. You have you could divide them territory wise. You could be a member of whichever PRO you like. Again, I would tell people that don't split hairs. Talk to somebody who understands, who knows it, and who can get you registered and register your works. Step one is for you to become a member, but step two, which is the more important step, is tell them your works. If you don't tell them your works, they don't know how to attribute royalties for those works, right? So to answer your question, you are technically, in theory, and actually even in practice, seeing income from streaming of your works. In fact, I will, Sandhya, go ahead a step further to say that even on the sound recording side, you'd be surprised, we increasingly see a lot of deals where there is a commitment to share revenues on the streaming income on the sound recording side.
Yeah, that's true.
So you are, as composer of your works, as the author, you are actually seeing income if you are aware and if you are tapping into it on both sides, for your sound recording as well as for your underlying composition and lyrics.
And this is regardless of the contract that you've signed with the producer, you're saying?
So if you are seeing it through the PRO, it is regardless of you having given up ownership in your works. That's why the law was amended in 2012, right? Which says that irrespective of you giving up your right, your ownership in your works, you have now what we call an inalienable right to receive royalty. So that right cannot be given up. So what happens simply is, let's say that I'm the author and I have given up 100% of my rights to you, Sandhya, who's the publisher. You may be 100% owner of the copyright, okay? So the person who is in that sense entitled to grant a license is you. Correct. So you can grant the license, but every time you grant a license, I still get entitled to receive a royalty, which the licensee has to pay. So the licensee will pay a society, whatever is the total licensee, the society will give you your share, the society will give me my share. Where the licensee is not, where the licensor, where the publisher is not a member of the society, again, the streaming service will give the publisher member directly their share and will separately give a PRO the writer's share. So in all scenarios, the writer is still covered.
So what is the typical split then? So the thing is, a lot of people are very confused about, that percentage, like, 50% goes to this person, 50% goes
it's
to that
largely 50-50. So at least with IPRS here in India, I mean, largely it is 50-50, the IPRS, PRS, BM, etc. So it's 50% is always reserved for the owner of the works. And 50% is the author's pool, is reserved for the authors. So typically IPRS will split it as 50-25-25, because in India, the songwriter is often not the same person as it is sometimes in the West. You have a composer and you have a lyricist, right? So they'll split it in equal ratios.
Okay. I think because, the confusion that I have come across, at least from the artist side, has always been that, but I have given up all my rights to a label. So how can I, get any revenue from streaming? And I keep telling them that, no, there is royalty accruing in your name, because it will not accrue to your favor only if your name is not there, right? And your name is going to be there. You're going to be acknowledged as the author of that work. So
Yes, I think the important thing for everyone to bear in mind is that please focus on what we call as metadata, right?
metadata,
The
exactly.
strong credit. There
Yeah,
is a reason.
yeah,
Some of them want to act very large-hearted and say, "I don't care if my name is not on the record, but that is making a difference." And then how the hell will you establish that you are one of the writers who's entitled to that
exactly,
share? So,
exactly.
and the only way to do it is today we barely have physical sales, right? So, what credit I'm
Yeah,
reading is the credit that I'm going to go by. Even as a society, if I had to cross check and really find out that was Priyanka truly one of the writers on this song, I'm only
yeah.
going to look at whether or not she's been credited.
Credited, exactly.
So please
Yeah,
insist that you're credited correctly. Whatever is your
yeah,
spelling, whatever is your stage name, please
yeah.
make sure that all that is there. In fact, another pro tip is when you become members of societies give you the option of submitting not just your name, but also your
Artist
stage
name,
name,
right? Yeah.
right? Your artist name, correct. So please give as many multiple avatars that you have, submit all of that.
Mm,
So and don't keep creating multiple profiles. It's all getting linked to one common sort of
mm,
CAE number, what we call it.
mm,
Like think of it as your common ID number.
mm,
But give all the various iterations. If your name has gone through spelling changes over the years,
mm,
or if you've sort of had different artist names, just keep submitting all of that information. So the more information that you give, and the accurate information that you more accurate the information is,
mm.
the more you stand to benefit.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, I remember the first time I brought up the phrase
Mhm.
metadata, I had these blank looks given at me, like, what the hell is that? I was just, and I had to like give them an explanation on how even Beyonce had a lot of royalties like accrued lying somewhere, not being able to
Yeah,
collect it because she had different names. She had Beyonce Knowles and something. She had Beyonce and something.
yeah.
She had Beyonce spelled something else. And I was just like, see,
And
Beyonce has got it wrong, so it's okay. You can figure it out.
yeah. No, and it's a fact. You be honestly, that's you're absolutely right. Because don't I think your listeners should know that you're not the only ones to whom it's happening. This is a
Yeah,
problem world
problem.
over. तो ये
Yeah,
सबके साथ हो रहा है. It's
yeah,
okay. It is one of the most common issues that
problem.
arises,
Yeah,
and it's fine. It's fixable. It happens every single day with each and every one. It's an easy fix. It's just that you need to be vigilant about it. You need to be proactive. You can't sleep over it.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, given this context and your experience so far and the kind of problems that you've
Mhm.
faced, like what do you think? Um, what are the changes you wish you could see in the Indian music industry, and do you think any of them have
Yeah.
started developing?
Okay, I'll talk of something that is relevant since we are in this whole COVID-19 situation and in this
Mm,
lockdown.
mm.
And in over the last few weeks now of this lockdown, we're all seeing a lot of streams, right?
Yeah,
A lot
yeah,
of live streaming sessions, a lot of concerts, and I
yeah,
think a part of my day is just me being busy giving advice on what licenses are required to make these streams happen,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I think so it's very current, it's very relevant, and it brings me
yeah,
to what is the one change that I want to see.
yeah.
No, I'm not saying that you don't need licenses to make cover versions. In fact, as much as everybody would love to champion for that, no, I still unfortunately can't endorse that view because I
Yeah,
have the highest respect for rights holders, and I think we all need to celebrate it and acknowledge it.
yeah.
But I think what one of the changes that I think, especially in this situation, people can consider
Mm,
is, I feel that as much as we try and educate everybody that licenses are required, I wish that there was enough of responsiveness, openness from the rights holders
mm,
to freely educate people that here, this is how you go about getting a license. This is how you contact us. This is how you can reach out to us. These are the right channels if you are interested in covering one of our songs, right? So every single time I've noticed that, when I tell artists that yes, but this is why your video got taken down, and no, you cannot do
mm,
this, put this up, and not have a license for it. And then they realize it and acknowledge it. The next question, okay, how do I do this? Where do I reach out? How do I contact this person? So there I wish that, guys, if on the one hand people are finally willing to acknowledge rights and go out there and seek a license, I think you need to do your bit by making that information more freely available, accessible, be contactable. And I think it's the need of the hour. Or just, simply even just make simple guidelines, or just make knowledge available. Like, why is it so difficult to just clarify that here,
Yeah.
if you're doing X, if you're doing this, you need this. If you're going to do, say, for example, if you're just doing an Instagram story on your own page, no commercial activity attached, no ticketing being done, nothing, you don't need
Yeah.
anything. It's probably covered under the platform's license.
Yeah.
If you're going to do the same thing, but now you have people ticketing for it, then it's, outside the purview of this license, then you need XYZ. If
Yeah.
you're going to do like a full blown sponsored corporate concert, then you need this. It's like, why
Yeah.
is it that difficult for you guys to come together and just, clarify? That's
Clarify.
all.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying my best to sort of bridge that gap. And over the last few days and weeks, I've been calling people, and I'll try and get the correct information, simply because I don't want to give out the wrong
Yeah.
information to people, and I want people to genuinely do the right thing.
Mm.
But yeah, that is one tip where I feel that it could benefit us even after COVID, because I know
COVID.
people
Yeah.
are going to want to do covers. People are going to want to keep doing more and more different things online, on social media platforms.
Yeah.
So I feel if there was more of a dialogue about and education about how that worked, it'll help people tremendously.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And I think people are slowly opening up to that as well. The fact that they are reaching out to like find out more information, and and especially with we have people
Correct.
like you championing the cause. So I just hope this keeps opening up more doors, and building that kind of awareness, especially for the
Yes.
artists. Yeah.
No, and like you're saying rightly, Sandhya, more and more art people who want to do it are reaching out. So I feel now
Yeah.
it's the other side who needs to make that participate
Yeah.
equally,
Equally
and be more sort of open in saying
engaging.
what is it that we want, don't want. Don't shy away from it. If there is a
Yeah.
license fee payable and it's ad hoc, it's
Mm.
fine. Don't shy
Yeah.
away from it. Don't think that we're gonna say that, oh my god, like how unfair is that. It's the nature of the business. We
Yeah,
we
right.
get it. But let's just have more clarity so people can stop being so confused all the time. And it just adds to the chaos, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw like a couple of posts from musicians, especially the indie musicians who are very who have. I mean, they have all valid reasons because, of course, given the situation, most of their job opportunities have been like hit, and
Of
so
course, yeah.
they have they've basically voiced their concern over being asked to play 3 gigs online, because at the end of the day
Right.
it's time and effort that goes in from their side. But then in the context of what you just mentioned about the licensing and who pays what, I guess
Hmm.
all of that links in. So how do indie musicians or musicians in general, um, how do they deal with the situation where they are at least compensated for their time, but and they
Right.
do so at the right way? How
So
can they push back? Yeah.
one thumb rule that I have, and I think this is across the board for all professionals: if you are
Hmm.
good at something, don't ever do it for free.
For free.
So I have learned it the hard way in my life. I still always, I still, I think from time to time get a very nice, solid reminder of that. But yeah, so please don't do it for free. Even especially in these times, you're being asked to do something, you're being asked to perform. There is value to your talent, and
Hmm.
please feel free to command it, and command it with respect and confidence, because you absolutely deserve it. That's
Hmm.
one.
Hmm.
Number two is in terms of licenses. Again, so with a lot of independent musicians, like I think a lot of them are performing their own original music that they own completely by
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then great. You don't need any additional sanctions. But
Yeah.
where you are going to again cover somebody else's songs, perform songs that are not your songs, that were not your composition, that were not your lyrics to begin with, or where you were maybe the original composer or performer, but it was done for a record label or for a
Mhm.
producer, and you don't have the rights anymore. Depending on the nature of what you're doing on these social media platforms, you may or may not require a license. So, very simply put,
Hmm.
if you are let's say I'm an artist, I decide that look, it's sunset, it's beautiful, I'm just going to bring out my guitar, turn on my Instagram live, and let
Hmm.
my community listen to what I'm doing and enjoying my sunset.
Hmm.
that is typically going to get covered under the platform's
Life.
blanket license. So
Hmm.
platforms do try and put blanket licenses in place.
Hmm.
Having said that, again, this is an exercise that they also voluntarily take. It's a painful exercise because they have to do it jurisdiction by jurisdiction, at times year on year,
Hmm.
with each record label, each publisher, each copyright society, each PRO, right? So sometimes they themselves may not have been able to conclude a license, which is why sometimes you'll see, if you're looking at somebody's Instagram story, it
Hmm.
might say this music is not available in your region. The
Hmm.
reason for that
Yeah.
is that perhaps the platform itself has not been able to conclude a license, or
Life.
there was a license previously, but there isn't one now because it's expired, it's not renewed,
Hmm.
whatever, right?
Hmm.
Um, so more often than not, if there is no absolutely no commercial activity attached to it, and you're simply going to do this, even if it is works that you don't own, it should be okay.
Hmm.
You may face instances where it's still taken down, and that's because, like I explained, the platform itself may not
Platform is
have a
good.
license in place. That's one.
Okay.
Now, add one layer. Let's say I'm doing the same thing at sunset, except that I tell my community of followers now that yes, but if you want to see me strum my guitar at sunset, go buy a ticket on Book My Show,
Huh.
right? And
Okay.
only
Yeah.
then tune in. Now,
Hmm.
the minute you do that, if you go and see, a lot of these social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram included, have clear community guidelines, right? That
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
falls under user generated content and what does not.
Hmm.
So more something like this would typically then fall outside the purview of the license that they also negotiated, right?
Huh.
Because there would be certain conditions on the basis of which even they got a blanket license,
Because
right?
it's commercial
So
use. Yeah.
correct.
Monetize.
So commercial use, or even when there are brands associated with it, and there could be different, there's varying degrees of what is permissible and what's not. So, but
Hmm.
again, I'm giving a very basic sort of a generic idea to for everyone to understand that yes, the minute you have some form of commercial activity attached to it,
Hmm.
chances are that you are then it's not going to get covered under the platform's license, and you will then need to go and figure out a license directly with the rights holder as well as a PRO.
Hmm.
Depend Because you're going to have both. There's going to be an element of synchronization because there is an audio and a visual,
Yeah.
and then there is an element of you communicating it to the public and reproduction. So that's why you will need both.
Okay.
If so, yeah, I hope that clarifies this to a certain extent.
Yeah,
I
that
know
is
it's
really helpful.
complicated. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't like listening to it, but guys, just flip the tables. And if somebody was performing your works and raising money on the
Exactly.
back of that, you're
Yeah.
not going to be happy about it either. So it's the exact same logic.
Yeah. Thank you. That was, that's very helpful and very insightful as well.
Most
And
welcome.
I was just curious, like given the kind of experiences you've had through the industry and over the years, and with all these things that have happened, all these changes that have happened, what's
Mhm.
been your most challenging project, especially from the music industry, not just the entertainment industry per se?
I think two really stand out the most in my mind. One is something that I did almost at the beginning of my career,
Hmm.
which was when there was this massive sort of upheaval going on at IPRS. This is
Right.
when they had just deregistered, the law had been newly amended, and then they deregistered themselves as a copyright society. At that time, I acted on behalf of a large class of authors, right, lyricists and composers, and did spend a lot of time to try and decode some of that madness. And we were part of quite an extensive litigation, and I think that was at that early stage in my career a lot of interesting learning. You bring a different, fresh perspective to the table, to where we see things now, right? Where the board was re-elected, it's been reconstituted, it's finally registered as a copyright society, and there are still lots of, I think I've had the privilege of seeing this organization sort of turn on its head, and is still trying day in and day out to implement measures and to try and see what it can do. So I think that's one thing that I've witnessed very closely,
Mm.
and has been it was challenging at all levels to be a part of something like that. And I think the other one is, of course, more recently, this entire debate on statutory licensing and whether
Yeah.
internet based services fall within the purview of being broadcasters or broadcasting organizations, and therefore can they seek the benefit of statutory licensing.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we saw the whole Warner Spotify matter, but I
Yeah.
think for me, it was fascinating in terms of a larger argument, which also actually, again, brings us back to thinking that do we really, perhaps we need specialized courts.
Yeah.
There's a provision for the IPAB, we know was never constituted,
Yeah.
and there's a copyright board. I don't know if there's a board, where's the member, but I'm
Mm.
saying that even otherwise, right, are members of the executive or the judiciary truly equipped to determine tariffs?
Mm.
Right?
Exactly.
Should there not be, just like in the US, you have specialized tariff
Yeah.
courts?
Yeah.
Is it time that we considered something like that? Because look, the way we consume content is changing, right?
Mm.
And a lot of times people will ask me that, do you think the law is archaic or whatever? But uh, I think one of the ways of looking at it is how often do you expect the law to be amended? At the rate at which technology is growing,
Yeah.
it's
Growing.
impossible, right? By that ratio, I think we need an amendment every
Every
few months,
month. Yeah.
which is not going to happen. I feel that we do have enough within the construct of the act even today. I think what we need though is
Interpretation.
faster, not just that, but faster
Yeah.
implementation,
Implementation. Yeah.
right? And how do you implement? Like if I had separate fast track courts whose only job was to set tariffs every single time that there was, newer categories of
Yeah.
modes of exploitation that came into being, I
Mm.
could go to a tariff court and have a tariff set. So at least the industry is not stalling as a whole, or
Slowly.
then we are not bound by some judgment years ago, which is then coming
Yeah.
up for renewal, and then we again fight and renegotiate a percentage and go before a
Yeah.
judge, and some idiotic nonsense like that that is not helping anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I like I'm saying, right, look at it purely, look at the economics of this, look at the numbers here.
Yeah.
This is an industry that is capable of growing
So
so much
and
more.
so fast.
If and there is so much revenue still untapped. Sure,
Mm.
we're fortunately living at a time where we're seeing so much of investment into this market,
Mm.
simply because it does have that sort of growth potential that it promises.
Mm.
So I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of just making sure that we came up with faster, quicker ways of resolving day-to-day commercial problems in the industry.
Mm. Yeah. That's quite. Yeah. That's quite intense, actually. Because that must
Yeah,
have
sorry,
been.
that's like a big industry
Yeah.
overview.
Yeah, but that must have been really challenging, because it's not just about your personal challenges, right? It's something that's affecting an industry as such, and that's
Yeah,
and you're
absolutely.
contributing to it as a professional, so that's a big deal.
And everyone benefits, right? It's got a, and more
Yeah,
so from the talent point of view, it has a direct correlation to what the talent is taking home at the end of the day. If
exactly.
I have a decent tariff, and if I have gotten that tariff fixed at a rate that is commercially commensurate with how deals would have been closed, then
Mm.
like I explained earlier in this conversation, a part of that whole royalty chain is that the income flows back to the author. So I think
Yeah,
everybody, all stakeholders have a vested interest in making sure that this is done properly and done quickly.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, we've had like a fairly interesting conversation today. I think, and I honestly speaking, I could go on for another hour, and maybe we could, like, have a
So
second
could
show
I.
yeah, I know this is, like, close to our hearts, something which is a passion project.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I mean, just wrapping up, what do you think? What would your
Hmm.
advice be? I mean, more advice slash tips slash recommendations be to musicians, just to, like, survive this industry, navigate what's going on, given the current situation as
Right.
well. Just
I think
yeah,
first and foremost, like I said in the beginning of our conversation, is that please get professional advice, get good professional
professional.
advice. Right? It's I think the damage that it does otherwise is just the same as you trying to self-medicate or trying to be a Google doctor.
Yeah, I use that example all the time. I'm just you have cancer every time. Then if you check your symptoms. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's the same thing. I mean, I would say, just like you spend on a lot of other things like that we end up doing for vanity reasons, where you want to look good in front of the camera,
Mm,
you pay for that gym membership, that nutritionist, that salon session, that stylist, that publicist.
mm,
Guys, getting good professional advice is as important, if not more. And really, it is your income, your works are your retirement plan. It could
Yeah.
be future for a future option that's bankable, not just for you, but for possibly even your future generations if you learn how to protect it right from day one.
Mm.
So please get good professional advice. That's one. Number two, again, for I understand that it comes at a cost, and if you don't want to get advice, just simple things that you can do on your own is take action. Stop
Mm.
talking about it. Stop going on a rant. Just social media shaming is not going to get you results,
Yeah.
right? So if something is incorrect, is wrong, you feel wronged by it, please take action. That includes, that's not talking to your friends about it and bitching and moaning about it, but write to the other person, build correspondence, build communication, see what you can do. Even simple things like when we're online and if you see something is wrong, there are enough takedown mechanisms and takedown tools today across every single platform. It's very simple. You don't even need someone to teach you. It has like, some of them have like a copyright school that you can go, you can follow the next steps, you can Google it, you can see how to file a complaint, you can see how to respond to a complaint if someone has filed a strike against you and you believe that that strike is incorrect. So,
Yeah.
I think, yes, getting professional advice, and number two, being proactive and vigilant are some of the biggest tips that will go a long way in helping young professionals.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And that's and also to
Sorry, I
aspiring
have one more
lawyers.
thing.
Yeah,
Sorry, I have
no.
one more thing.
Please, please, please,
Is
please,
that
please, please.
please, I know that music is a very collaborative process, and that's really the beauty of it, right? When we
Yeah,
have different creators come together.
yeah,
So I would say, whilst that is happening, and it's just the way the business works. Please don't forget to also document it. Sure,
yeah.
you don't need a contract for everything, but simply having an understanding
Understanding.
crystal clear, even if it's in a simple WhatsApp message or on an email. Sit down with
Mm.
your creators, with your collaborators, and just iron it out from day one so that you're not in an embarrassing situation later where
Yeah.
relationships are getting sour and you feel that, you feel betrayed, you feel shortchanged. So,
Mm.
yeah, that's the one thing I would say is that just have your understanding crystal clear and don't use terms that you don't understand. If you don't understand the meaning of publishing, don't loosely
Yeah.
use it.
Yeah.
So keep things as clear. And one absolute last tip is when you're trying to read a contract, I think, and this is again even for your lawyers, right?
Yeah.
That if a layperson reading it doesn't understand it, it's not good. It's not drafted well. So
Exactly.
that's the key to any good, well drafted contract. Keep it simple, keep
Simple.
it clear,
Yeah.
because it when things are clearly written, it actually reflects the clarity of thought of the person who drafted
Who
it.
drafted it, right?
So that's the one tip that actually I would give a lot of young lawyers, that stop using complicated jargon. A lot of time lawyers use words and language that they saw in some other template, that if I stop and ask them that what does this mean, they have no
Yeah.
idea.
No
That
idea.
why does this apply in this context, they don't know how to explain it. So
Yeah.
don't do it, guys.
Yeah.
Just keep it simple, keep it to the point, keep it clear. A short document does not necessarily mean it's a bad document. In fact,
Mm.
you'd be surprised how often it actually is good because it's just clear. It's not saying things in five different places in a repetitive way, in
Yeah.
active voice, passive voice, and just adding more confusion and chaos. I don't need to see an indemnity clause written in 10 different ways throughout the document,
Yeah.
right?
I
It
know.
still means the same damn
Same
thing,
thing.
even if
Yeah.
you said it once. So yeah, I would say keep it simple.
Okay, that's great that you responded to the question that I was going to ask. Basically, asking you, what your advice to young lawyers would be. But
Yeah,
it's,
keep
I
it
mean,
simple.
it's so much fun discussing all of this. I think, and I realize there's so much more that we have to work on, and there's so many unexplored opportunities. And I think even as lawyers, this entire industry is something which is like a massive opportunity in itself. And I'm just hoping that with the,
Absolutely. And I think
yeah,
it's a great time to be a part
to
of the
be a
business
part of
because
this,
we're truly witnessing
witnessing
like a
some
turn of
massive
the
change. Yeah.
century kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And with Spotify, all these online platforms coming in, I think they're just changing the way everyone's perceiving music and licensing and all of that. Like, so I'm grateful that we are here right now at this stage.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Priyanka. It's been so much fun doing this. I think we should generally catch up.
Thank you, as always. It's always fun chatting with you. When I completely lose track of time, I could go on and on. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me. And it's really been. I think they were all really fun, interesting tidbits of information and questions to address. So thank you. It was very very. I enjoyed doing this and having this session with you.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Hopefully, we'll plan one more and then we can have
Done.
more interesting questions to spice it up. Okay, then.
Done. Sounds
All
good.
right. Okay, so that
Thanks, Sandhya.
thank you, Priyanka. So that was Priyanka Khimani. I'm really happy with this session, and I can't wait for our next session with Priyanka. Maybe we'll schedule something in a couple of months, and I'll be happy to have any questions if you have any doubts on what we have discussed, and I can redirect you to Priyanka as well. So take care, folks. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. That's all for today.